South Commission in solving the socio-economic problem in Africa. My dear students, you have to make sure that at the end of our lesson of today, you are able to attempt this question. Of course, together with some other questions that you are going to find in your studies, in your examination, which are related to this topic. My students, let's now start with the non-aligned movement. First, let's see, what is this non-aligned movement? Non-aligned movement is a loose organization which was established in 1961. It was established in 1961 in Belgrade. It was established in 1961 in Belgrade, Yugoslavia. And, in the meeting which was hosted by the president of Yugoslavia of that time, who was called the Bronze Tito. And this conference of 1961, in fact, it was called after the conference which took place in 1955 at Bandung in Indonesia. Bandung in Indonesia. And this conference of Bandung, it was it was called the Afro-Asian Conference. And this is the conference that set the conditions which later came to establish the non-aligned movement. In this conference of 1961, about 25 countries had participated in the conference, and represented by the presidents or prime ministers, the head of the state or head of government. Africa was represented by 3 presidents. There was President of Egypt, Gamal Abdel Nasser. There was also President of Ghana, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, and President of Guinea, Ahmed Sékou Touré. They were among people who attended the conference. But there was also Ahmed Sukarno of Indonesia. There was Bronze Tito of Yugoslavia. There was Jawaharlal Nehru of India, the Prime Minister of India, and so on and so forth. These were the leaders who attended this conference, which established the non-aligned movement. But what was about the non-aligned movement? Non-aligned movement was established as a response to East-West conflict. Remember, we discussed this when we talked about this. When we were discussing the issues of Cold War. There was East-West conflict. East-West conflict. The East-West conflict is what produced the non-aligned movement. That means these countries which came to establish non-aligned movement, they were neither aligned to the East nor to the West. That means they were neutral countries. And this is what came to bring about the existence of this country's so-called non-aligned movement. My dear students, as you can see, this is the map. This is the map which shows the original members of non-aligned movement from all over the world. In the Western Hemisphere, there was Cuba, was the only country which has been a member of non-aligned movement, at that time when it started. And as you can see, these are the African countries which were the members of non-aligned movement, the original member of non-aligned movement. And also other countries like Indonesia, Cambodia, and so many other countries, as you can see. In fact, non-aligned movement later came to have the members, which was more than a half of the world countries, as you can see. So this is the movement which was established with the aim of trying to isolate some third world countries from the East-West conflict, which has been so highly. My dear students, let's now look the NAM's effort to solve the problem of underdevelopment. What is the contribution of non-aligned movement to solve the problem of underdevelopment of the third world countries? The first way which NAM has contributed in solving the problem of development of the third world country, it is through, calling the third world countries to have a common voice, My dear students, by common voice here, my dear students, we are referring to have one say in the international platform. Having one say in the international platform. Third world countries are so divided. As you can see as we speak, the world is very much united. When European countries go to the UN, they can go, those days they could go as European Economic Community. And now they can go to the international platform as European Union. As the United States can go as a very powerful country. USSR also at that time, and Russia now, could go as a very powerful country. But unfortunately, third world countries, they could go as the small countries with no voice and so on. So one of the objective, one of the very important contribution of NAM to solve the problem of underdevelopment of third world country, it was to make the third world countries go to the UN, go to the international discussions, to the different international platforms as one. That means they could go there as one. So one thing was to to give voices to the third world countries in the UN and its various agents. That was very important contribution of NAM. The second is that NAM fight against neocolonialism, neo-economic dependence and exploitation. Remember, we said earlier in this topic that among the things which has contributed much to underdevelopment of the third world country, it is neocolonialism. So non-aligned movement has dedicated in fighting against neocolonialism, fighting against neo-economic dependence, in fact, and exploitation. And we are going to see this in detail, that among things which were proposed by various leaders, including Fidel Castro, it is to call for total disengagement between the northern countries and the southern countries, developed countries and developing countries, because in that engagement, in that relations, there is nothing third world countries get but exploitation. They are exploited by the developed countries. So among things they wanted to do, it was to fight against neo-colonial economic independence and exploitation. That is the second. The third is to struggle for new international economic order. They wanted to get new international economic order, new international, economic order. What does this new international economic order means? It means that the southern countries are complaining. In fact, they were complaining, and this is the complaints which exist even now, that the third world countries, they don't have a say in the international economic systems. Everything in the international economic systems is planned by the developed countries. So the third world countries want to have a new international economic order, which will give the third world countries a voice in the international organization like GATT, of course, which was later replaced, General Agreement on Trade and Tariff, which was later replaced by WTO, World Trade Organizations. The third world countries have no voices in deciding about the international trade. They don't have a say in the United Nations, and so on and so forth. So among other things, they wanted, they maintained the struggle for international economic order through North-South dialogue. They wanted to get chances in the in the international economic order, but that will be obtained through North-South dialogue, the dialogue between the northern countries and the southern countries, the developed countries and the developing countries. But of course, we are going to see that after that has failed, they turn and introduce what is called a South-South cooperation. That means the southern countries now, they can speak on their own and they build up, and they build themselves as a bloc and have a voice of her own. And that's exactly what happened. So this is the third contribution of NAM to to solve the problem of underdevelopment of the third world countries. The fourth is formation of South-South Commission and its role in facilitating South-South cooperation. This is also another very important contribution. South-South Commission was formed. South-South Commission was formed in 1986 in Zambia, in Lusaka, Zambia. And in fact, after it was formed, the former president of Tanzania, Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere, was appointed to become a chairperson of that South-South Commission. And the later South-South Commission has proposed the South-South cooperation. Remember, South-South Commission was formed after the failure of North-South dialogue. Remember, North-South dialogue was was conducted, and after the proposal which was given out by by the Brandt report, the report which was prepared and written by Willy Brandt, the former Chancellor of West Germany. So what came up with then, it was the formation of South-South Commission in Zambia. This was formed in Zambia during the Non-Aligned Movement Conference of Lusaka in 1986. My dear students, another contribution of NAM to development of to solve the problem of underdevelopment of third world country, my dear students, is that it encouraged the formation of regional organization and integration schemes. It encouraged third world countries to form regional organization. Third world countries to form regional integration schemes as a way of trying to alleviate the problem of poverty. In fact, they believed that the formation of these regional organizations, like we have OAU, there is the Arab League, and so on and so forth, this probably would help. They believe that this would help to solve the problem of underdevelopment, because it will, because they will increase cooperation among those people who are, among those people who are the members of those particular organizations. This is what they believed. And also they believed that by forming regional integration schemes, like what we have today, ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, East Africa Community, or for instance, some others like ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Countries. By having such kind of associations, then that will help a lot to improve the economy of the particular countries, third world countries. This is also another very important thing they believe, that it is going to help a lot to solve the problem of underdevelopment. My dear students, the last point to this is to eradicate all form of colonialism in the world by bringing the majority rule in South Africa, to eradicate all forms of colonialism. They wanted to eradicate all form of colonialism. Remember, among the obstacles to development of third world country, it is colonialism, because colonialism cannot bring development to a country which is under colonial rule. What colonialism can do to that particular country, it is to exploit, exploit, and exploit, nothing else. So they wanted also to bring development to those third world countries which were under colonialism by first supporting the colonization of those countries. And my dear students, as you can see, this has played a very major role in bringing the majority rule in South Africa. Or for instance, the independence of Angola and Mozambique. It has so much contributed by the role played by Cuba. Remember, Cuba as the member of non-aligned movement, they gave material, moral, and even they took some troops to go to fight in Angola, Mozambique, and Namibia. And that facilitated the independence of these countries. So this is another very important contribution of non-aligned movement to, to solve the problem of underdevelopment. My dear students, this is another point. Of course, NAM called for total disarmament. Non-aligned movement called for total disarmament and establishment of a free nuclear zone. It called for total disarmament. Total disarmament, it means that the third world countries should not allow at all the establishment of nuclear programs in their countries. They should not allow the nuclear weapons to escalate to their countries. This is what NAM believed. So they wanted the establishment of the free nuclear zone, that third world countries should not be a nuclear zone. This is what they wanted. They also opposed two countries having developing nuclear weapons. They opposed the countries like Israel and South Africa developing nuclear weapons. And remember, one thing which was obvious those days is NAM has accused South Africa because they were practicing apartheid, and Israel was practicing Zionism. So they were listed by NAM as the countries which have the very, have the policies which were against the humanity. So they opposed the Israel and Israel and South Africa acquiring nuclear weapons. They also wanted to bring into negotiation table India and Pakistan, who of course they are nuclear power, but they were also traditional enemies. So that is again another very important contribution of NAM. Also, NAM has demanded reform in the United Nations organization. They wanted reform in the UN. They wanted reform in the UN. Why reform in the UN? They wanted reform in the UN because United Nations, ever since it was established, they used to have what we call the permanent members of UN. And these permanent members of UN, remember, they are formed of 5 countries. There is United States of America, there is China, there is France, there is Britain, and these countries, they have the monopoly of making all major decisions by themselves, and no third world countries was there among the permanent members. Of course, there are 15 members, and other 10 members, they are rotating, but they don't have the veto power. So non-aligned movement wanted the reform in the United Nations, at least to give more power to the third world countries, at least to have representation, a permanent representation in making major decisions. My dear students, this is the decision making in the United Nations, as you can see. in our screen, the decision making. And decision is always made by Security Council. Here we have the General Assembly, where all countries are where all member countries of UN, they enter here into making decisions. But their decision is not bind until it is authorized or it is passed by the Security Council. And here there are 15 members. Out of these 15 members, 5 members are permanent, and those 5 members have got the veto power. So non-aligned movement want to change this kind of situation to make it better. So, my dear students, after we have talked about the contribution of non-aligned movement to solve the problem of underdevelopment, let's now, my dear students, go to another second very important part, and this is the Brandit report of 1980 on third world poverty question and its outcome. We are talking of the Brandit report. What is this? Brandit report is the report which was prepared and written by the former Chancellor of West Germany, who was called Willy Brandt. Willy Brandt was appointed in 1977, in fact, after the idea given by the president of World Bank of the time, Robert McNamara. That was January 14th, 1977. Robert McNamara, who was also, who was previously the Defense Secretary of Defense of the United States of America, he gave that idea of establishing a commission of experienced people trying to look about this, this problem of poverty and the gap of, the gap between northern countries and southern countries. So the Brandt report, therefore, is the report written by independent commission, first chaired by Willy Brandt, the former Chancellor of West Germany, as I've said, and there were so many members. Among them, my dear students, was Amir Jamal, who was the former finance minister of Tanzania, was among the important people who made that commission. And the Brandt report came up with what is called the Brandt line. Brandt line, as we shall come to see, in fact, it divided. Brandt line has divided the world into 2 parts. Of course, this line is not very straight, as we are going to see it in the next map, but divided the world into 2 parts, about 30 degrees north, and the northern countries are rich and the southern countries are poor. So this is the line which has been drawn by Willy Brandt. And so he said, the southern countries are poor, the northern countries are rich. So something has to be done, at least to help the south, because these countries, the countries of the south and the countries of the north, they depend on each other. So some efforts should be made to help the southern countries to overcome the problem of poverty. My dear students, this is the world map. And it shows the Brandt line, as you can see. This is the line. It starts here. It goes, this United States of America, and it leaves below Mexico to be, one of the developing countries, or third world country. And as you can go, all countries of South America at that time, they were listed as the least developed countries. All African countries also the same, as it goes here and take some of the countries, India and China, they were among those countries which were least developed. And it goes this way. This is Japan, it is left. And it goes this way, and you can see Australia and New Zealand, they are left as the developed countries. This is the line which was drawn by Willy Brandt, as you can see. Developed countries, developing countries. This is the way he drew the line. And this is the Brandt line. My dear students, however, we have got some questions that we have to ask today as we proceed with lesson. Let's look at this map. Let's look at this map and ask yourself, is the Brandt line as he drew it valid today? Ask yourself, how valid is the Brandt line today? Because as you can see today, as we speak, Brazil is one among the industrialized countries. We have Argentina. Here, of course, here we have South Africa. We have Egypt. You see, and these are other countries, Saudi Arabia, there are some countries, India, for instance. You see, in fact, in short, there are a group of countries which emerged, and they are called the BRICS. They are called the BRICS. They are called the BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. You see, those countries are regarded now as industrialized countries, and they are among the G33 countries in the world. So that means the Brandt line, as he drew it, it is not valid today as we speak. My dear students, the Brandt report had some observations. The first observation of the Brandt report is that the standard of living of the people of the South and that of the people of the North, it is so highly divided that there is a very large gap between the standard of living of these people. So there should be a massive transfer of resources. A massive transfer of resources from the northern countries to go to the southern countries to help the southern people. So that is exactly what he proposed, my dear students. The second thing that he observed, my dear students, is that unless major international initiatives are taken, the survival of the human people, it is at stake. The human race is in question. So there should be measures taken at least to save people, to save people of the South. Otherwise, those people in the South will perish because of the problems they are now facing. And the third observation is the Commission concluded that the world economy is functioning so badly that it damages both the immediate and long-run interests of all nations. He said the economic systems of the world is functioning so bad. There is no, there is no equality in the way the world economy is functioning. It functions in favor of the northern countries. So he suggested that some measures should be taken, and those should be immediate and long-run measures to solve those problems. This is the observations which was made by the Brandt report. My dear students, let's now go to suggestion of Brandt's report on solving the problem, the poverty question in the third world countries. What Brandt has suggested. The first suggestion which was given by Willy Brandt in his report is that cooperation between governments in the north and south for mutual advantage. There should be cooperation between the government of the north, that north and south, north and south should establish a cooperation for mutual advantage. That means if there is cooperation between the southern countries and the northern countries, then it should be for the mutual advantage. All countries should be benefited by that cooperation. The second thing is a massive transfer of resources is needed to accelerate a global economic development. A massive transfer of resources. There should be the transfer of the resources from the northern countries to the southern countries. You know, my dear students, as you can see, this is what has been suggested. But among the, among things that the northern countries were so reluctant to do, it was to transfer resources. Remember, here we are talking of the transfer of technology. Transfer of technology from the southern countries, from the northern countries to the southern countries, something which was so difficult. And if technology is at all transferred, then sometimes it is what we call a vertical transfer of technology, a vertical transfer of technology. That means technology which is brought here, it is not the one which is intending to help the southern people, but a technology which comes, which is so high, and when it comes, you need some expertise from those countries to operate that kind of technology. So it is not very helpful. Technology which Africa and third world countries wanted, from the northern country, it should be a horizontal technology. Technology which is equivalent to our people. Technology which is transferred by teaching our people how to do different things. But the northern countries were not ready to give us their technology. We are proceeding with the suggestion given by Brandt's report on solving the, poverty question in the third world countries. Now let's go to another point. Another suggestion was that North, South, and the communist bloc, they share responsibility of promoting development and managing change in the national economic system. Remember, we spoke about the international economic system. That the way it was functioning, according to Brandt's report, it was not functioning well. It was functioning in favor of the northern countries. So, among things proposed is that there should be changes in the international economic system, and that will be made possible by the cooperation between the, the northern countries, the communist bloc, and the southern countries. Here there are some differences, my dear students, that you'll have to note. The northern countries here are referring to developed countries. By northern countries, north means developed countries. Developed countries. And the south means developing countries. And the communist bloc, of course, you know the communist countries. The communist bloc, here, of course, we are referring to the second world countries. Second world countries. That means they don't fall under the category of third world. They don't fall under the category of first world. They fall under the category of second world. That's why Brandt report has suggested that the northern countries, the southern countries, with the communist bloc, they have to cooperate together to change the international economic system. Remember, this is exactly like what we saw in our discussion about NAM, when they suggested for the introduction of new international economic order. And the Brandt report as well also suggested for the managing change in the international economic system. Something, again, as we can see, which is so difficult because of the fact that the Western countries, the developed countries, they are so highly benefited by the existing economic system, which is pure and typical exploitative. By having World Bank operating that way, by having International Monetary Fund operating that way, by having World Trade Organization operating that way, it makes the developing countries, developed countries, to continue to exploit the developing countries. And so for that case, the gap between the North and the South will never ever be bridged for, for that case. My dear students, another suggestion which was given by the Brandt report on solving the problem of underdevelopment of third world country is proposing countries to exercise a greater voice, that developing countries to exercise a greater voice and management of international economic system, to exercise a greater voice. My dear students, as you can see, what has been suggested here does not differ much from what has been suggested by the non-aligned movement, that there should be, the developing countries should have a greater voice in the management of the international economic system. This is in General Agreement on Trade and Tariff, or WTO. But then the problem is the same as what we have said. It is not easy as what Brandt's report has proposed. The Western countries, developed countries, will never agree to. Just to give power to third world countries in making decisions, and so on and so forth, as long as they are benefited by this existing system. So, my dear students, this is another thing, a quick agreement on set of emergency measures. They said that there should be a quick agreement because they knew that what has been suggested, it might take a long time to reach a conclusion. For instance, when you speak of changing the international system, when you speak of changing the managing economic system and give third world countries more power, this is something which is not going to be done very quickly and soon. It is going to take time. So they said, a quick agreement on set of emergency measures should be, should be done. That means there should be the quick emergency measures to solve the problem which might occur before the implementation of the long-run plan. So there should be an immediate measures to solve some problems, and this include the problem of famine. Like during the report, at the time when the report was released, there was a problem of famine in Somalia, in Ethiopia, in Kenya at that time, and the report suggested that there should be some quick measures to solve such problems, like diseases, famine, and so on and so forth. This is the Brandt report and the suggestion it gave to solve the problem of developing countries. Let's now look at the impact of the Brandt report on third world poverty. What is the impact of that report? The first impact of the report is the emergence of North-South dialogue. As we have said, Brandt report has suggested for the some measures to be taken by the North and the South. So what came next then, immediately, it was the North-South dialogue. North-South dialogue. And why this dialogue? This dialogue was important so as to reach what has been suggested by the Brandt report. So the dialogue, of course, was conducted, but what came next is the dialogue failed. The dialogue failed because the North rejected to comply with the, with the demand of the South. So the dialogue failed. And the second is increasing poverty of the people of some third world countries and the widening gap of development between North and South. In fact, when the report was released in 1980, the gap between the southern countries and the northern countries was not so highly, was not so large. But as we speak today, the gap between the northern countries and southern countries has been very highly widened. So for that case, we can say there was increasing poverty of the people of the third world countries and the widening gap of development between the north and the south. In fact, instead of helping the third world countries, as reporters suggested, the third world countries has been much intimidated by the relations which was proposed by the by the Brandit report. So for that case, as we can say, as a result of that Brandit report on third world poverty, there was increasing poverty of the southern countries. The third impact is the debt crisis. Debt crisis is another theme. Debt crisis. The increase of debt of the third world countries. And the debt has increased because of some reasons, and that include the flow of money from the northern countries, southern countries, as has been suggested by the Brown report, that there should be the transfer of resources from the northern countries to the southern countries. But my dear students, how that resources transferred? If we are talking of financial resources, if we are talking of of financial resources, or maybe technical assistance, which is given in terms of loans. In terms of loans, then the loans that third world countries received, they were associated with very high interest. As a result, the third world countries have to suffer because they have to pay that money back. And the money they borrowed, they pay it back, but much of what they are paying, it is not a real debt. It is interest. It is interest. So you can see that has increased the debt to the third world countries. And, so third world countries, they are listed to among the highly indebted countries in the world. And that role was played by IMF and World Bank by providing loan to the third world countries, which increased the suffering of the third world countries. Another point here is, another impact is increasing hunger and famine. There was increase of hunger and famine among the third world countries because more concentration was put in production of raw materials, as suggested by the Brown report, that the southern countries depend on the north as the north depend on the southern countries. The southern countries are the producers of raw materials, so they have to produce raw materials to feed the northern countries' industries. But the northern countries should produce industrial goods and supply them to the southern countries. So by concentrating in production of cashew crops, it made some countries not to put their effort in production of food, and the result of that, it was famine among the third world countries. So that is another very important thing. Okay, my dear students, now at least you have seen, we have come to look at the impact of the Brand report, and that is the end of our discussions on the issue of Brand report. Let's now go to South-South Commission and South-South Cooperation. What is this South-South Commission? South-South Commission was formed in 1986 at Lusaka, Zambia, in Non-Aligned Movement Conference, and the former president of Tanzania, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, was appointed to become a chairperson of that commission. This was an alternative after the failure of North-South Dialogue. The failure of North-South Dialogue made the third world countries to think of establishing their own initiative to solve the problem of underdevelopment. In the other hand, they said, after the failure of North-South Dialogue, they could not just sit back and relax and do nothing. No, they have to do something. And what they decided to do is that non-aligned movement decided to form a commission which will go through and look at the way they can do to solve the problem of underdevelopment. And that commission came with the formation of the South-South Cooperation, that the southern countries, as you can see, that the southern countries, now they have to establish their own cooperation. And this, remember, was the idea which was formally given by Fidel Castro, who called for total disengagement between the northern countries and southern countries. However, this was not to be implemented that way. This means that the southern countries will now join together and have their own cooperation. And if they want to cooperate with the north, then they'll go to do that as a bloc. This is what has been agreed. My dear students, let's now look at what South wanted from the north. What South wanted from the North was very simple. One, they wanted the favorable terms of trade. That means they wanted equal trade. They wanted some reform in the in the General Agreement on Trade and Tariff, which was later changed to become the World Trade Organizations. They wanted, they were against the bad monetary system, and regulations. The Western countries were the one who were, Western countries were the one who were valuing the currency of the third world countries. So third world countries' money were always facing devaluation as the Western countries wish, as developed countries wish. So they wanted that, that kind of system to be changed. To allow appropriate transfer of technology. They also wanted appropriate transfer of technology. Technology to be transferred appropriate. Remember, I say appropriate because you might get a technology from the northern countries, but it's not appropriate. As we said, there are two ways of transferring technology. It can be vertical or horizontal. What is more preferable here is horizontal transfer of technology and not vertical. And another thing is to allow sufficient flow of financial aid and loans, to get more financial aid and loans. Because if you look back to after the Brandt report was released, then the financial aid and loans from the northern countries, in fact, from countries like Britain, has decreased. So they want sufficient flow of financial aid and loans. My dear students, let's now look at the effort of South-South cooperation in solving the problem of our development of third world countries. What do they do? What did they do to solve the problem of underdevelopment of third world countries? The first way, it was to create a greater voice to the southern nations. To create a greater voice to the southern nations, they wanted the southern nations to have a more greater voice, especially in the international platform. That when they go to the United Nations, then they can speak as one. They can speak as a bloc. And so, during the negotiation of anything, then third world countries can go there and stand as one under South-South cooperation, South-South Commission. The second thing was to make sure that southern countries stand as a bloc. They wanted southern countries to stand as a bloc, and they said OPEC, for instance, Arab Leagues, Organization of African Unity, now African Union, it has to go as a bloc. Remember, they said the world is very much united. The countries are very much united today than ever. For instance, today, as you can see, European countries, they can go to the international discussion as European Union. The Americans, of course, the United States is powerful countries, you see. So third world countries also, they have to try to go to the negotiation. They have tried to go to the international platform as a bloc. This is also what they wanted. Also to ensure technical cooperation for the entire region of the third world countries. There should be a technical cooperation to the entire region of the southern countries. Remember, the southern countries, though they were falling at that time under the third world, but they were not really the same in terms of technological development. Some countries were more advanced than the other. So what they wanted is that the third world countries should go to the international platform, they should have to have a cooperation among them in order to help each other, in development. Another thing was to foster economic integration between the southern countries, as we've said. There is OPEC, there is SADC, there is ECOWAS, there is LAFTA, there was the ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and so on. Also the need for mutual cooperation rather than dependence, on the northern state. There should be mutual cooperation among the southern states instead of depending on the northern countries. And the other thing is regional and interstate conflict among the southern states. Sorry, these are the challenges. What are the challenges which faces South-South cooperation? One is the regional and interstate conflict among the nations. There are some conflict among the southern nations. Either nation against nations are fighting, or sometimes some countries faces the civil war. This is one of the obstacles. And a good example was the war between Iraq and Iran. These two countries were the member of the they were the members of southern country. South-South cooperation, but they were fighting and they fought against each other for about 8 years. Another thing is bilateral agreement between individual developing countries. Bilateral agreement. Two countries enter into agreement. One southern countries and another northern countries. They enter into agreement, either trade agreement or maybe some economic agreement, and sometimes the agreement which they have just entered violate the terms which are being set by the South-South cooperation. This is another very important obstacle to development of South-South cooperation. Another thing is expanding gap of development between the southern countries. My dear students, today as we speak, for instance, we have country like Tanzania, we have country like like Kenya, Uganda, or rather you can say the East African countries. How can you put East African countries in the same pool with China of today? Because China used to be a third world country, China used to be a southern country, but China today as we speak is the second largest industrialized country in the world. We have Brazil, we have Argentina, we have India, and those countries today, they have so well developed in industries. You cannot put them in the same pool with other countries like Somalia and so on. That's why some historians, they just put, redivided that divisions, that now we have the first world, second world, third world, and the fifth world, because of the way the economy, because of the way the country's economy is so highly, because of the gap that exists today in the country's economy. My dear students, another challenge is to combat natural disaster has been something very difficult. The third world countries sometimes cannot combat on their own the natural disasters. For instance, we have famine, we have drought, flood, hurricane, tsunami, and so on. We saw, for instance, the way Indonesian people suffered from tsunami, and they have to wait for the help from the developed countries. We saw, for instance, the way people suffer from famine, Liberian people, for instance, and the third world countries could not play a role to help them. So the South-South cooperation, therefore, is becoming difficult because of existence of those natural disasters that the southern countries on their own cannot solve. Another thing here is the use of negative force by the northern countries. Northern countries have always been using the negative force in trying to solve some problems. In fact, they pretend that they are trying to restore democracy, or they are just trying to prevent the crime against humanity and the invade some third world countries. We saw in Libya, we saw in Iraq, we saw in in Grenada, as we said earlier, and so on and so forth. And all these things are done. Or sometimes they go to under pretense that they are fighting against terrorism. But all in all, this is affecting the third world countries. My dear students, let's now come to the end of our lesson. We are going to break and we'll be back to look at the questions that I gave you earlier.
You are watching Darasa Online.
Welcome back, my students. After we have gone through our lessons, now I believe that you can attempt the questions that I gave it to you during the beginning of our revision lesson. I gave you 3 questions, and those questions, now I think you can find those questions very simple. Our first question, remember, was show the contribution of non-aligned movement in solving the third world poverty. What is the contribution of non-aligned movement in solving the third world poverty? Here we have the answers, but I'm going to go very quickly because now you already know the answers, and I have already explained these answers in detail during our studies. So the first point here is the common voice. But my dear students, before you start to talk of this, remember, always this is an essay question and it has got 3 parts. There is introduction, there is main body of the question, and there is conclusion. In the introduction, make sure that you at least you give a very short historical background of non-aligned movement. When was it established, for instance, who were the leaders there in the non-aligned movement. You have to speak the aim for being established. We say it's because of the existence of East-West conflict and so on. And after that, you go straight and look at the points and look at the and give the answers to your main body. And the first point here is the common voice. That one among the contribution of non-aligned movement, it is to give a common voice to the third world countries, at least to speak as one wherever they go to the international discussion and negotiations. The second is to fight against neo-colonial economic dependence. Remember what Castro has said. He proposed for total disengagement between the northern countries and southern countries. This was proposed during the Group 77, which took place in Arusha in 1977. And another thing was the introduction of new international economic order. These third world countries, non-aligned movement wanted the introduction of new international economic order. That means the existing international economic order, it was operating in favor of the northern countries. So they wanted the introduction of new international economic order which will be functioning for the mutual benefit of both northern countries and southern countries. So this was to call for negotiations to bring up the equality in economic, in economic systems, to reform different international organizations and so on. Another thing was the formation of South-South dialogue, which was later followed by the South-South Commission. This is another contribution of the non-aligned movement. Remember, it is non-aligned movement which proposed for the formation of the South-South dialogue. Remember, we said that proposal was given out at Lusaka, Zambia, in 1986, and appointed Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere to become the chairperson of that. Of that commission. Another thing is the formation of regional organization and integration. This, of course, we discussed already in detail. Eradicate of all forms of colonialism, and also establishment of nuclear-free zones. Remember, among things which affect development of human being is the spread of these nuclear weapons. We said earlier, especially not only that a lot of money is spent, but also during the testing of those nuclear weapons, people are affected, also living organisms affected, and so on and so forth. So that is another very important contribution of non-aligned movement to in solving the problem of third world countries. And the last thing is the demand of the reform in the United Nations. These are the points which shows the contribution of non-aligned movement in solving the third world solving the third world poverty. My dear students, after this, of course, you are going to have conclusion, and conclusion is anything relevant. That means you'll have to show, and probably most important, you'll have to explain the probably very short about the how do you see the non-aligned movement today? Is it is it still relevant? Because it was established at least to fight for to disengage third world countries from the East-West conflict. East-West conflict which is no longer. So you have to see the validity of non-aligned movement today as we speak. The second question, my dear students, is assess recommendations of the Brandit report of 1980 in solving the third world poverty. Again, we have gone through this, and the answers here, as you can see: cooperation between North and South for mutual advantage, promoting and managing changes. Promoting and managing change of economic system, massive transfer of resources, developing countries should have a greater voice in the international issue, and taking some emergency measures to solve the immediate crisis. And finally, what has been proposed, taking some emergency measures to solve the immediate crisis, and so on. So, my dear students, this is the second question. The third and last question is, evaluate effort of South-South Commission in solving the problem of in solving problems in Africa. How South-South Commission has played, what part has been played so far by South-South Commission in solving the socio-economic problem in Africa. One, of course, we have said in the non-aligned movement, in fact, the points look very much the same: to create one voice, as we've said it, stand as a bloc, technical cooperation for an entire region, foster economic development, also mutual cooperation rather than dependence of the northern countries, and also provision of soft loans from the advanced southern countries. As I said, southern countries are not of the same level. Some are advanced and others are not. For instance, Brazil, India, China, they can give to other developing countries some soft loans to help them to develop and so on. My dear students, now we have finished the we have finished to look at our questions. Now I think you know the answers, and you can answer other questions which look similar. But before we end our discussions, my dear students, I'd like at least to go back and look at the Tanzania's effort, because after President John Pombe Magufuli came to power as the president of Tanzania, he has tried his best to solve some problems. In trying to solve the problems, as we have seen earlier in this topic, that some efforts have been made so far to solve the problem of underdevelopment in third world countries, Tanzania being one of them. Let's look what effort has been made so far. Let's look about fighting corruption. Tanzania has dedicated in fighting against corruption as one of the problems which affect third world countries so much. And of course, several cases has been opened, and and some people are being taken to trial, and others has been prosecuted. Also, creation of independent economy. We are trying. The government is trying a lot, at least to to generate money through collection of taxes, the money from internal resources, to avoid the economic dependence from the developed countries. Another thing is encouraging industrialization. Encouraging industrialization, it means by trying to make sure that either we revive the old industries or we establish the new industries, and also enhance people with the small-scale industries to get some capitals and be able to move on. Another thing is improving infrastructure. Country cannot develop without infrastructures. And finally, improvement of health sector.
ليتك دوما قريب. ليتك دوما قريب.
The Mboni Show imedhaminiwa na Serengeti Lager.
Hapa Serengeti tunafahamu machache kuhusu kuwaleta watu pamoja. Tunafanya hivi kila siku. Serengeti Premium Lager, taifa letu, fahari yetu, bia yetu.
Bunny Talk Show, 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 Bunny Talk Show.
Karibu katika The Mboni Show. Kama ambavyo unaniona nina furaha, tabasamu haliniishi. This is 2020, alhamdulillah. Na unajua hakuna raha, nimesema bado niko Zanzibar. Zanzibar raha, niko hapa. Kama unavyoona niko uwani Kibarazani. Hapa ni Kibarazani. Sindio?
Uwanjani tu uwanja.
Niko uwanjani, najidai nakwambia, najimoya huku naangalia kuku akipita, huku naangalia bahari ile pale, wala hata sipati tabu, naiona bahari ile pale. Hii ndio The Mboni Show. Kama ambavyo tumekwambia, The Mboni Show 2020, mambo yanazidi kuwa moto. Leo niko na Bi Nasra Mohamed Hilal. Huyu ni almaarufu sana, ana mambo mengi. Najua sio mgeni kama wewe ni mtazamaji mzuri wa Mboni Show. Nakumbuka sana miaka yetu ile ya mwanzo, mwaka wa kwanza wa pili wa Mboni Show, tulikuwa na Bi Nasra Hilal. Bi Nasra, siku ya mapinduzi ya Zanzibar 1964, alikuwa na umri wa miaka 23. Meaning kwamba sio mwenzako, sio mwenzetu. Kumbuka alikuwa na miaka mingapi? 23. Bi Nasra anafahamu mambo mengi sana kabla na baada ya mapinduzi Zanzibar. Bi Nasra ambaye ni mwenyekiti wa board ya ZBC, Zanzibar Broadcasting Commission. Leo nimejitahidi kutaja maneno vizuri Kiingereza, Kizungu. Na pia ni mwenyekiti wa taasisi ya mwanaharakati binti Siti bin Saad. Tunamuita bibi huyu. Mimi sijui ni kitukuu. Lakini sitaki kuzungumza mengi sana. Tunaye Bi Nasra leo, tutazungumza naye mambo mawili matatu. Bi Nasra, karibu tena katika The Mboni Show.
Asante sana.
Najua sio mgeni.
Asante sana.
Na kitu ambacho nimegundua bwana, Bi Nasra amekuwa ana bahati. Mara nyingi tukikufanyia interview tunakuwa nyumbani kwako. Mara ya kwanza tulikuwa pale Malindi. Leo tuko wapi? Manga Pwani. Why Malindi mpaka Manga Pwani?
Kwanza asante sana, karibuni.
Asante.
Hapa Manga Pwani. Bahati mbaya ndio tuko katika maradhi haya ambayo hatuwezi hata kukwambia tutakupeni hata maji. Tunaogopa. Kila mmoja lazima awe katika hadhari yake ya inayotakiwa. Kama ukisema kwa nini Malindi mpaka Manga Pwani? Nadhani mimi ningelitamani niwaulize wazee wangu. Kwa sababu mimi babu yangu, bibi alomzaa babu yangu, yani upande wa baba, wamezaliwa katika eneo hili. Samu ya pale kuna kihame cha nyumba ya kwanza ya ghorofa iliyojengwa hapa, ambao ndio walikuwa kwao na walizaliwa hapo. Na nyuma hapo kuna makaburi ambayo ndio walikozikwa toka enzi hizo. Wakati ule ambapo bado hakuna njia ya gari, walikuwa wanakuja kupitia huku pwani. Na ningependa alafu ukishuka pale mtakuta vibaraza ambavyo vilitumika toka enzi hizo kwa kushukia pwani. Sasa lakini babangu kwa bahati alipokuwa kwa mjini tena akaoa mjini, na mimi siku zote nasema bahati mbaya nimezaliwa Malindi. Sikuzaliwa hapa. Kwa sababu wazee walipokuwa nakaa hapa, ilitokea kulikuwa na harusi ya baba yangu mdogo, na uwanja huu ndio ulikuwa unafanywa hiyo shughuli. Sasa wazee wakasema huyu mtu mjamzito anaweza akaja kaumwa, na atakuwa anashughulika kumpeleka mjini wala nini, bora apelekwe mjini akakae mpaka ishe shughuli. Kumbe ilikuwa ndio jala yangu mimi kwenda nikazaliwa huko Malindi.
Kwa hiyo basi sawa. Naamini kuna sehemu nyingi zimebaki na majina kutokana na asili ya jambo fulani. Kwa mfano Darajani pale hakuna daraja, lakini tunaambiwa Darajani. Sasa kulikuwa kuna nini mpaka ikawa Darajani?
Pale sio kama ilikuwa daraja tu, lakini kusema kweli mji wa Zanzibar ulikaa kama triangle. Ukitoka hapa sasa hivi kwenye polisi Malindi, ukipita mbele ya manispaa ndo kijibarabara kidogo, kile ndio kilikuwa barabara. Hili barabara kubwa tu nilopita sasa hivi na magari ilikuwa bahari, sio barabara. Barabara hili tumekuja kulijenga wakati wa mapinduzi kwa kujenga nchi na tukalijenga. Kwa hivyo hapa ukitoka polisi kama unataka kuja zako kushamba, kuna kuta kubwa nene hapa. Hili ni kuta, na upande wa huku lilikuwa kwa vile vile lilikuwa ni bridge hii kubwa sana, ambayo wakati huo ilipokuwa ikipita treni ilikuwa ikipita pale. Enzi hizo za wazee wakati kuna treni. Lakini upande wa huku sasa hivi ukitazama utakuta viwanja vya mpira vya watoto. Lile ni bahari. Kama kina sisi wakati tunasoma chuoni, tunatoka tunakuja kucheza pale kwenye pwani, mchanga mweupe, bahari. Sasa hamna bahari. Alafu hapa katikati, hii njia katikati ndio hasa watu sasa hivi wanajua ndo Darajani. Kulikuwa na daraja la vyuma. Lile barabara linakwenda yani chini vile, sasa hivi barabara ilikuwa ni maji moja kwa moja. Na jingine ilikuwa kwa Mkonazini pale karibia kwenye kanisa. Pale ilikuwa kwa daraja la 3. Kwa hivyo hapa yote yalikuwa ni madaraja, na hii barabara tunaoita sasa hivi inayopita moja kwa moja mpaka Pwani Kizingo ilikuwa ni bahari kote.
Vipi na hili jina la mji mkongwe limetokana na nini?
Mimi kusema la kweli hata nashangaa kwa nini tunalita mji mkuu mpya uko wapi? Huu ulikuwa ukiitwa mji, hasa ulikuwa ndo Zanzibar town. Ndio mji. Na kwa wakati ule ukiitwa mji wa nyumba za mawe, ukiitwa mji wa Stone Town. Lakini baada ya mapinduzi, na huu ndio mji ulikuwa toka asli. Kwanza ulikuwa mji ukiitwa wavuvi. Pale palipokuwa sasa hivi pana Beit la Jaibu, ilikuwa kuna sikia zama hizo ndio ilikuwa palace ya huyo mfalme wa kienyeji Mwana Fatima. Aliondoshwa na Baraka ndio ikajengwa Beit la Jaibu. Kwa hivyo ule mji ulikuwa toka zamani uko pale kama ni mji hasa.
Okay.
Lakini hata Wareno walijenga ile ngome Kongo, walijenga Wareno kwa sababu ule ndio ulikuwa mji.